Hello and welcome to episode 38 of Afrikanists Assemble. This month, we are exploring the power of translation between African languages. With such a diversity of languages across the continent, each with unique expressions, cultural nuances, and ways of thinking, the potential for inter-African translation is immense. However, many African languages are often translated only into former colonial languages such as English, overlooking possibilities for direct translation and knowledge exchange within Africa itself. So, we asked our contributors to reflect on this. What potential do you see for translation from one African language to another that you don't currently see being practiced or realized? Join us as we uncover new perspectives on inter-African translation and the rich connections it could foster.
Into endikholelwa ukuba ingenziwa ukuguqulela ulwimi lwesintu ukuya kolunye ulwimi engenziwayo ngoku luthando lweelwimi zaseAfrika. Ndikholelwa ukuba xa abantu okanye abaphandi benokuqala ngokuzithanda iilwimi zaseAfrika, uthando lwabo lwezi lwimi lungafikelela kulangazelelo lokufunda ezinye iilwimi zaseAfrika. Loo nto iyakuthi idlulele kubaphandi, ababhali kwakunye nabapapashi ukuba bangapheleli ekulubhaleni ngolwimi olunye xa bebhala uluncwadi olunjengemibongo, amabali amafutshane, njalo njalo. Oku ke kungadala ukuba nawuphi na umyalezo okhutshwa ngumbhali ngolwimi lwaseAfrika ufikelele nakwabo bangazelelwanga kolu lwimi. Umzekelo, njengokuba ulwimi lwam lweenkobe isisiXhosa, ukuba bendinolwazi oluphangaleleyo lweelwimi lwesiNdebele, loo nto ibiza kudala ukuba ndiguqulele ubugcisa bokubhala kwam kulwimi lwesiNdebele. Oku kungenza ukuba nabantu abantetho isisiNdebele umyalezo wam uye ngqo entliziyweni, nanjengoko uNelson Mandela esitsho, ukuba uthetha nomntu ngolwimi aluqondayo, umyalezo uya entloko, kodwa ukuba uthetha nomntu ngolwimi lwakhe, loo myalezo uya ngqo entliziyweni. Ukuvala le ntetho yam, ndithi masiziqhelanise nokuzazi iilwimi zaseAfrika ngokuphangaleleyo. Enkosi.
What potential do you see for translation from African language to another that you don't currently see being practiced or realized? There are potentials in translation from African language or languages to other languages. A good number of these potentials have not been seen, practiced, or realized. Examples of such potentials are A. Indigenous knowledge transfer. African language is a major constituent of indigenous knowledge. Its translation is expected to convey the inherent indigenous knowledge within African language to the translated language. B. Indigenous technological know-how. This is another aspect of African language that has not been realized through translation as an endemic part of African language. And this indigenous knowledge sustained Africans before colonialism to the point where colonialism took over an interaction with the other world. C. Language pyrotechnics. This is a clever or skillful display of language use that are highly endemic in African language, in its writing and expressions, and they are still very much in use today. C. Language arts. This, I will say, is the use of language as arts, e.g., in advertising, comedy, jingles, cartoons, and other forms that depict act and the use of language. Therefore, there are potentials beyond the above listed if there is sustenance of African language translation into other languages. It may reveal these potentials even more in the course of translation sustenance across Africa.
O potencial que eu vejo está na apropriação do acervo conceitual das ciências sociais e humanas. Juntamente com o meu irmão mais velho e amigo, Mamadou Diawara, da Universidade de Frankfurt, e agora é diretor do MIASA em Accra, tivemos um projeto de promoção da erudição em África. Esse projeto foi generosamente financiado pela Fundação Gerda Henkel de Düsseldorf. E uma das nossas preocupações foi justamente a da tradução. Para nós, a tradução significa compreender que problema no interior de uma comunidade linguística tornou necessário um determinado conceito. Por exemplo, porque os conceitos de sujeito, ação social ou mesmo representação coletiva se tornaram necessários na sociologia. A ideia era de interrogarmos a aplicação dos conceitos das ciências sociais em contextos alheios, no caso em África, perguntando em contrapartida se os significados que eles transportam recuperam devidamente as preocupações desses contextos. Então nós temos um livro em preparação com vários capítulos que discutem exemplos práticos dessa interrogação a partir da tentativa de traduzirmos conceitos fundamentais das disciplinas para as nossas respectivas línguas. Embora o contexto seja diferente, pois nós traduzimos de línguas europeias para línguas africanas, eu penso que há muito potencial na tentativa de tradução de provérbios, por exemplo, para outras línguas africanas. Eu vejo os provérbios como instrumentos de organização de ideias e, nesse sentido, pode ter interesse saber que estruturas de inteligibilidade existem em África. Até que ponto, por exemplo, a experiência histórica, bem como a proximidade cultural, produziram espaços dentro dos quais podemos descortinar elementos sugestivos de teorias de conhecimento sui generis. Algo me diz que um exercício desta natureza poderia contribuir para uma melhor clarificação do lugar a partir do qual pensamos falar, enquanto africanos, quando reclamamos um lugar próprio de enunciação no contexto dos debates pós-coloniais e decoloniais. Eu não creio que este exercício tenha sido jamais feito.
The question for this week it's very interesting because it reclaims for us our Africanity. The idea that one day Africans will begin to speak to Africans without mediation, without going to English first. Can you imagine for a moment a text in Yoruba or a play by Chief Okediji, who is late now, translated to Swahili, or even translated to Xhosa? The potential is mighty, it's tremendous. But it means that more Africans who speak Swahili or who speak Xhosa would have access to some of the Yoruba texts, or some of the poems, or the chants of Yoruba people translated to these African languages. Instead of every of the African languages being translated into the languages of the metropole before Africans can read. It needs a lot of work, it needs a lot of planning, and we just must do it. And it looks like there is a light at the end of a tunnel. I just hope that that light is not of a moving train, but surely We'll get there one day where there will be literature translated into African local languages.
When we talk about language translation in intellectual discourse, we mean the process of making other native speakers understand the information another native speaker is trying to pass across. It is important to note that spoken or written language is the major medium of communication. Hence, for any language to gain wide acceptance, recognition, and relevance, there is need for translation. In African context, the need for language translation cannot be overemphasized, since we have well over 500 languages in Africa. The challenges of not being able to translate some languages is gradually leading to their extinction. Some examples include Ajawa language in Bauchi state of Nigeria, Homa language in Adamawa state of Nigeria, and Pati language in Taraba state of Nigeria, to mention but a few. Hence, if scholars can take the pain of meeting with native custodians of culture in order to understand their language, because it is those who have a good knowledge of culture that can translate language effectively without losing the depth of such culture. The potential for translating from one African language to another that is not yet being realized are numerous, among which are: 1. Translation will help different language understand other cultures better. 2. It will also help to see both cultural similarities and differences among the various African languages. This can promote social bonding, acceptance, and interrelationship. 3. Language will help foster peaceful coexistence among different ethnic groups, since they can understand themselves through communication. 4. Translation can help minor ethnic groups to gain global relevance and as such survive language extinction. 5. Translation can enhance African unity and communality, which can help us to achieve a better global relevance and overcome the silent power domination and geopolitics through language and technology from the global north. In conclusion, if African intellectuals can make language translation a major project, it will help resurrect hidden African heritage that the absence of language translation had kept in obscurity.
Kiamu ni lahja mojawapo ya Kiswahili. Lugha ya Kiswahili iko na lahja mbalimbali na mojawapo ni lahja ya Kiswahili. Ningepata lahja ya Kiamu, ningepata fursa ya mimi kutafsiri Kiamu kwa lugha nyingine ya Kiafrika, ningechagua kutafsiri kwa lugha ya Kipokomo. Kipokomo ni lugha ya Kiafrika ambao iko upande wa zisiwa za upande wa zisiwani. Na ni community ambao imekuweko Lamu kwa miaka mingi, karne nyingi sana. Ilikuwa Lamu, imetangamana sana na watu wa Amu kibiashara, kitamaduni zingine, wamezaana hapa. Wao wako na mila zao ambao zimesaulika. Mambo yao mingi sasa ni kama yamesahulika, hakuna ambao anashikilia hizi tamaduni zao za Wapokomo. Wao wenyewe na watu pia kuzihifadhi tamaduni kama hizo. Na Wapokomo ni jamii kutoka Tana River, na county ya Lamu si mbali, ni kupita vijiji fulani ufike Lamu. Toke Tana River, ufike Garseni, ufike Witu, na vijiji vingine unafika Lamu, si mbali kabisa. Wao maneno ya Kipokomo mingi yameingiliana na Kiswahili ama Kiamu, na ni rahisi kwa kutafsiri lugha hizo mbili, Kiswahili Kipokomo na Kipokomo Kiswahili. Inakuwa ni rahisi na itapendeza sana, kwa sababu ni kama itakuwa tumeikuza lugha ya Kipokomo. Asanteni sana.
The beauty of translation from one African language to another is that it gives in-depth insights to a people's indigenous knowledge and thought system. It also highlights the universality of different cultures, especially in the areas of creative oral expression, for example, in the areas of proverbs. One potential I see is that it can promote cohesion in society and also help people to appreciate different cultures.
First, I would like to begin by saying that I am not aware of any African language that has been translated to another African language. I have seen text written in one African language and maybe translated to English. For example, Ngugi wa Thiong'o's I Will Marry When I Want. But I haven't seen any that have been written in an African language in Kenya, in the Kenyan context, I mean, and then translated to another language. And I think, there is a lacking in that point, because I think it has a lot of advantages. One of the advantage being, for example, when you translate one language to another, you're not just communicating an idea, but you're also trying to communicate the culture. And so what I think is we talk of cohesion, we talk about how to stop violence, and it is mentioned in all these. And I would think that the one way to create cohesion is by letting people understand other languages, understand the culture. Because when you do that, you're not just passing the information, you are understanding the culture. And so it helps in understanding the behaviors of the people. It helps in understanding their livelihoods. And therefore, you're not just passing information. And it would expand the knowledge that the people have about other cultures and about other people, and maybe try to be more respectful. And it will help at the end of the day to create this harmony amongst the people. So one of the ways that I think it's not being realized at this point is that. The second thing is that when you translate a language also to another, you're not just doing a word-to-word translation of the language, but you're trying to kind of adhere to the rules of grammar. They have to be the structures, the grammar, and everything else. And so I think that if we translated more, then what we will be doing is that actually there will be the intellectualization of language. It helps to refine it, because every single time you find more rules and more structures, it refines the language, it develops the language, and then it develops these linguistic resources. And so I think that is the potential that we are not tapping into. Our African languages are becoming extinct because we no longer teach our children how to speak our mother tongues. We begin maybe from Kiswahili to English. And so languages are disappearing. So if we translated these languages more, then again, we will have grammar books, dictionaries, and all that. And it will help, therefore, to advance the language and keep it from extinction.
I see a great potential for translation from one African language to the other, especially from a word-based language to a sign-based one or an ideograph. This potential has been overlooked over the years, especially in terms of comparative indigenous linguistic studies. Most African languages, like Akan, Yoruba, Igbo, and others, are based on the Romanized script. That is, they are word-based and are derived from Western letters. These languages are different from those based on ideographs like Adinkra. However, I see the possibility of translating a script-based language to an ideograph-based one, what I could call a cross-script translation. I have in mind here from Igbo to Adinkra, the ancient indigenous Akan language system. Let us take the Igbo idea of Obi, which means a traditional compound comprising a group of huts belonging to a man and his wives and children. Interestingly, this almost translates to Fihankra in Adinkra in the ideograph above, as documented in Bruce Willis's The Adinkra Dictionary. Fihankra means an enclosed or secured compound house, a type of house with rooms or sub-rooms or sub-houses arranged round a central courtyard, as well as symbolizing brotherhood, safety, security, completeness, and solidarity. I really think that a script-based language translation to ideograph will reveal many interesting details that would revive indigenous African ideographs, especially by unveiling how rich and encompassing their meanings have been.
My name is Maarten Maus. I'm Emeritus Professor of African Linguistics at Leiden University in the Netherlands. I suggest Bantu-to-Bantu translation as the most pressing potential. The Bantu languages form a huge family of fairly closely related languages spoken over half of the African continent. It should be relatively easy to translate from one Bantu language to another, at least easier than translating into or from a European language. Yet such translation does not happen much. Once it takes off, the current automatic translation programs that build on translated text will further enhance smooth translation. The perspectives are enormous. School books developed in isiNdebele could be used to develop the same in Kikuyu, Bemba, Shona, etc. The excuse that development of teaching materials is expensive and time-consuming would disappear. Any app developed in the Bantu language in one country can easily be copied in that case to be useful in half of the continent. I'm sure manual and automatic Bantu-to-Bantu translation has already started in South Africa, but more can be done if applied massively and across nations in the public domain.
Well, I'm not an expert in translation, but from observation, the translation of text from one indigenous language in Nigeria to another language is not common, but there are potential benefits to be derived from such ventures. Equally, outside academia, in some contexts in the society, the common practice is to translate from English to local language or local languages, and not from one local language to another. In advertorials, in public announcements, this is the common practice. However, in popular culture, for example, in music, drama, there are instances of translation from one local language to another. For example, choruses used in worship in churches are often translated from one local language to another. There are Igbo songs which have been translated to Xhosa, to Yoruba, to Tiv, among others. Such attempts demonstrate the potentials inherent in translating from a local language to another. Beyond translating the words, there is an evidence of domesticating the context, the values, the emotions created in the songs from one source language to the target language. The worshippers easily flow with the songs more than the ones composed by people outside Nigeria. It is clear that they understand the deep meanings and the emotions imbued in the songs. It is from a culture that is very familiar with them, and they can easily relate in worship. I think such ventures can be replicated in other contexts, including studies on Nigerian languages and culture. Beyond focusing on contrastive analysis of the structures of the local languages, translation of text on different subject matters from one local language to another would be of great benefit. For example, translating text and other materials on traditional medicine and healing practices for fertility treatments, for example, traditional legal practices, social and civic responsibilities, women repertoires, norms and values regarding child upbringing, translation of proverbs, rituals from one language in Nigeria to another without involving a colonial language, English, will be of great benefit in cross-fertilization of knowledge. Enshrined in this text are traditional knowledge systems and practices that could be domesticated, replicated, and utilized in solving problems across societies in Nigeria. I believe that translating directly from one local language to another will make it easier to share deep knowledge, adapt the knowledge across cultures to solve diverse problems within the Nigerian society.
Àǹfààní púpọ̀ yóò wà nínú ṣíṣe àyàngbùfọ̀ èdè Áfíríkà kan sí òmíràn, àmọ́ mo rí pé a kò fi bẹ́ẹ̀ kọbi ara sí ní Áfíríkà. Ṣíṣe ááyàn ògbufọ̀ àwọn ohun èlò ẹ̀kọ́ láti iléèwé alákọ̀ọ́bẹ̀rẹ̀ títí dé iléèwé gíga láti èdè Áfíríkà kan sí òmíràn yóò ran àwọn akẹ́kọ̀ọ́ àti olùkọ́ Áfíríkà lọ́wọ́. Ẹ̀kọ́ yóò yé àwọn akẹ́kọ̀ọ́ yékéyéké, yóò sì mú ìlọsíwájú bá ètò ẹ̀kọ́. Bí a bá ṣe ááyàn ògbufọ̀ ìwé kíkà, àkóónú ẹ̀kọ́ kọ̀ọ̀kan àti àwọn irinṣẹ́ ẹ̀kọ́ láti èdè Áfíríkà sí ara wọn, yóò jẹ́ kí gbogbo akẹ́kọ̀ọ́ rí lò dáadáa. Ìmọ̀ wọn yóò sì rinlẹ̀ nínú ẹ̀kọ́ sáyẹ́ǹsì, ìmọ̀ ẹ̀rọ, ìmọ̀ iṣẹ́ ọnà àti ìmọ̀ àwùjọ, pàápàá fún àwọn ọmọ tó wà ní ìgbèríko tí òye àwọn ẹ̀kọ́ náà yóò yé dúdú ju ti tẹ́lẹ̀ lọ. Bí a bá tú ìbánisọ̀rọ̀ ètò ìlera, ìbánisọ̀rọ̀ ilé ìwòsàn àti àlàyé oògùn sí èdè Áfíríkà oríṣiríṣi, yóò ran olùtọ́jú àti àwọn tó nílò ìtọ́jú lọ́wọ́ gidi gan. Mo rí i pé àìgbọ́ra-ẹni-yé láàárín olùtọ́jú aláìsàn àti aláìsàn ti rán ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ aláìsàn lọ sí ọ̀run òjijì. Ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ ti ṣí oògùn lò tó wá dènà ìlera wọn. Mo rí i pé ó yẹ kí a mú èyí ní ọ̀kúnkúndùn. Bí wọ́n ti kọ wọ́n ní èdè Gẹ̀ẹ́sì, Faransé àti Lárúbáwá, ó yẹ kí gbogbo èdè Áfíríkà kọ̀ọ̀kan tú ìbánisọ̀rọ̀ ètò ìlera sí èdè oníkálukú. Èyí yóò ran àwùjọ kọ̀ọ̀kan lọ́wọ́ láti ṣẹ́gun àìsàn kíákíá, nítorí àgbọ́yé yóò wà láàárín olùtọ́jú aláìsàn àti aláìsàn. Bí a bá tú àwọn ọ̀rọ̀ ètò ọrọ̀ ajé àti káràkátà ní Áfíríkà sí èdè oríṣiríṣi ní Áfíríkà, èyí yóò mú ìdàgbàsókè bá ètò ọrọ̀ ajé àti káràkátà ní Áfíríkà. Ó yẹ kí a tú ìwé okòòwò, ìwé ìfohuntónilétí, ìwé ohun ọ̀gbìn, ìwé àdéhùn káràkátà sí èdè gbogbo tó wà ní àyíká ibodè kọ̀ọ̀kan tí a ti ń dúnàádúrà. Èyí yóò mú kí ètò ọrọ̀ ajé máa gbòòrò sí ní Áfíríkà. A lè tú àwọn ọ̀rọ̀ irinṣẹ́ kọ̀ǹpútà àgbélétan, ìtàkùn àgbáyé, ọ̀nà ìbáwùjọ sọ̀rọ̀ ìgbàlódé, ìròyìn àwùjọ, ìwé àwùjọ sí èdè Áfíríkà lóríṣiríṣi. Èyí yóò jẹ́ kí àwọn èdè yìí máa gbòòrò sí, kí ìlọsíwájú bá àwùjọ àti àwọn ọmọ Áfíríkà. Àwọn ọmọ Áfíríkà tó wà ní ìgbèríko yóò lè ní ìmọ̀ ìjìnlẹ̀ nínú ètò àti òfin orílẹ̀-èdè, ìwé òfin àwùjọ kọ̀ọ̀kan àti ìwé gbogbo ẹ̀kọ́ ní Áfíríkà. Títú àwọn èyí láti èdè kan sí òmíràn jẹ́ ohun tí a nílò láti tẹpá mọ́ ní Áfíríkà. Bí a bá tẹra mọ́ ṣíṣe èyí, ìmọ̀ tuntun yóò bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ní búyọ ní àwùjọ wa ní Áfíríkà ju ti tẹ́lẹ̀ lọ. Ẹ ṣeun.
So when we look at the potential for translation between African languages, I see a powerful opportunity for deeper cultural connection and knowledge sharing that is not yet fully realized. So translation from one African language to another goes beyond words. It's about preserving our unique cultural insights, traditional knowledge, and our shared histories in a way that resonates more authentically with diverse African audiences. For instance, when we translate between African languages, we open doors for education in indigenous language, which can empower young learners by bridging knowledge directly into their linguistic and cultural context. And this could significantly improve understanding and engagement, especially in subjects like history, indigenous science, and environmental studies that hold the unique perspective across African communities. Currently, we see our translation efforts focus primarily on African languages to English or French, which can filter out cultural subtitles and depth. But if we translate directly between, let's say, isiZulu and Kiswahili and isiXhosa and Yoruba, we retain much more of our heritage and perspective. So this potential is particularly strong in the fields like literature, health, technology, and even the legal system. Imagine accessing legal resources, health information, and even government documents in your mother tongue are translated from a neighboring language rather than a colonial language. It will give many people a greater sense of inclusion and autonomy. So the real opportunity lies in creating systems that value and facilitate translation directly between African languages. Now, with advance in technology like AI and machine learning, this could become more achievable. And in doing so, we will be taking steps towards linguistic equality, honoring our languages, and creating a future where African knowledge freely across the continent without relying solely on colonial languages as intermediaries.
Gịnị bụ ntụgharị? Ntụgharị bụ isi n'otu asụsụ ka na-asụ nke ọzọ iji mee ka mpụtara na nghọta pụta ihe. Ebumnobi ya bụ ịhụ na onye na-ege, agụ maọbụ asụ asụsụ nke abụọ, asụsụ nnabata, ga-aghọta mpụtara ntụgharị ahụ dịka ndị nwe asụsụ nke mbụ asụsụ siri pụta siri ghọta ya. Uru ntụgharị bara. Ntụgharị emeela ka ụwa niile bụrụ otu obodo site n'iwepụ aghọtaghị asụsụ ma bute nzikọrịta ozi na nghọta, nkwalite mgbanwekọrịta omenala, nka na ụzụ, bịa bulite ogo akụ na ụba, nwee ezi mkparịta ụka maka ahụike ma nweta ikpe ziri ezi maọbụ ikpe nkwụmọtọ. Kedu ikike ntụrụugo ị hụrụ na ntụgharị site n'otu asụsụ Afrịka gaa n'asụsụ Afrịka nke ọzọ? Ike ntụrụugo dị n'etiti otu asụsụ Afrịka na asụsụ Afrịka ọzọ juru eju nke a na-aghọtachabeghị mkpụrụ ha. Ha gụnyere ntụgharị ka ahụike. Enwetachabeghị n'uju iri isi n'usoro ahụike ke mba Afrịka. Ọ dị ezigbo mkpa ịtụgharị ozi gbasara ahụike iji kwalite ma gbanwerịta usoro ahụike n'etiti mba Afrịka, dịka ịgba ọkpụkpụ, iwepụta mgbọ n'ahụ site n'ịtụ ahịhịa na-awaghị ahụ, dịrịzie gawa. Ngwa nkụzi ihe. Mgbe a tụgharịrị ngwa nkụzi ndị nọ n'asụsụ mba ndị ọzọ gaa n'asụsụ anyị, ọ na-eme ka ọha na eze keta oke na nkụzi na mmụta. Ntụgharị iwu. Tụgharị akwụkwọ iwu ndị nọ n'asụsụ mba ndị ọzọ gaa n'asụsụ anyị na-eme ka ọha na eze nweta ikpe nkwụmọtọ. Ọtụtụ ndị mmadụ amaghị oke ruru ha nke ha ji enweta ikpe ziri ezi maka na akwụkwọ iwu nọcha n'asụsụ mba ndị ọzọ. Ọtụtụ mgbe, maka na azụghị ndị ntapreta n'ihe gbasara ntụgharị maọbụ ntapịa, ndị mmadụ anaghị enweta ikpe ziri ezi. Ntụgharị nka na ụzụ. Ọtụtụ mgbe, anaghị eji nka na ụzụ mba Afrịka akpọrọ ihe, ebe ụfọdụ na-ahụta ha dịka adịgboroja maọbụ ohu nka na ụzụ. Ọ bụrụ na atụgharịa nka na ụzụ anyị site n'otu asụsụ mba Afrịka gaa na nke ọzọ, ọ ga-agbagotekwu ma nwee ike ịma aka na mba ụwa. Ịghọtazụ mkpụrụ nke ikike ntụrụugo ntụgharị site n'otu asụsụ Afrịka gaa n'asụsụ Afrịka ọzọ chọrọ ndị nwe asụsụ isonye na nkwalite na nchọcha asụsụ ha, ịkwalite ngwa asụsụ anyị na ngwa ndị eji ebi ndụ, inwe nkwekọrịta n'etiti ndị ntụgharị, ndị ọkachamara n'asụsụ na nka na ụzụ, gọọmenti ịmawapụta ego na inye nkwado, ndị omepụrụ ndị ọ na-ara ahụ, ndị nkwado nchọcha nke ala anyị na mba ụwa, ịkwado asụsụ anyị site n'ịmawapụta ego na enyemaka ndị ọzọ dị iche iche. N'ozuzu oke, achọpụtatụle ikike ntụrụugo dị na ntụgharị nke a na-aghọtachabeghị mkpụrụ ọma ya niile, dịka ọtụtụ ka na-ahụta ntụgharị dịka ọrụ oke na ngwere nwere ike ịrụ, nke na-eme ha amataghị nnukwu uru ntụgharị bara n'oge ọbụla n'ụwa niile. Ndewonu.
Those were all the insights our contributors shared this month. Which of their ideas resonate with you? Do you see untapped possibilities for direct translation between African languages that could enrich cross-cultural understanding on the continent? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Afrikanists Assemble. If you're as curious as we are about the potential of African languages, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of our upcoming discussions. See you next month.
Sweetie. Karabwatin, 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 Eyiojo sweetie. Karabwatin, Karabwatin, Anewe, Karabwatin, Eyiojo sweetie. Inasa mitolelonga imete gira ite na ile. Ai kene amati balanga.